Hi, a pleasant day to everyone. Good morning to you, ma'am. My name is Geraldine Logroño. I live from Patima in Abanga, Bohol. And I am currently studying at Buena Vista Community College, and I'm taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in English, and I am from Section 2C. Today, I will be discussing the approaches of teaching in grammar. There are 13 approaches in teaching of grammar, but today I will just only discussing six of them, which is the inductive approach, deductive approach, the reading approach, the audiolingual approach, the silent way, and lastly, the functional notional approach. So first, I will be demonstrating of what is inductive approach is. So, inductive approach is the inductive teaching approach is a sort of discovery learning that focuses on student. From the word discovery, you will let your student discover on their own. So, you will let your student on their own understanding, on their own perception. In this approach, you must show few examples of grammar. Then also the student what they notice. So in this approach, you as a teacher, you will give only few examples about the grammar, and then you will let your student notice the what if there's something wrong, or if there is or is this right. So you will give just some few examples, and then you will let your student to notice this. And then after you will ask them what they noticed, you will slowly engage and slowly introduce to them the proper grammar and pattern. So in this approach, you will be allow your student notice the grammar, but after that, you will be slowly introduce and teach them the proper grammar patterns. So that is all. That is inductive approach. This approach is very familiar for me because way back when I was senior high school and high school, um, we have what we call the learning that which is the DLP learning. In DLP learning, the teachers will give us the activities which we are which we answer it without discussing from the teachers. We will understand it and we will answer it in our own perception, in our own thoughts. Then after we'll answer this, our teacher will check our activity, and after our teacher will check the activity, that was only the time which they will be discussing what is all about, what is the topic all about. So that is the inductive approach, which at first you will let your student discover on their own, then your discussion will be afterwards. Next approach that we'll be discussing is the deductive approach. So deductive approach, it involves the learner being given a general rule which is applied to specific language examples and hand through practice exercises. So if the inductive approach is student-centered, then the deductive approach is teacher-centered, which learning teacher-centered learning where the joints of English grammar explained, stated to the students, and then tested. In this approach, the teacher will provide and discuss the topic to their student, and then after the discussion, the student will answer and analyze it, their activity. So this is the antonym of the inductive. If in the inductive approach, the student will analyze on their own. In deductive approach, the teacher will discuss it first to the student, and then the student will answer afterwards. Once the grammar introduced and explained, student usually complete grammar exercise to become familiar with pattern. So, the benefits of this deductive approach is the way by this method has been commonly used. By the way, this deductive approach is commonly used in English classroom in the West. So, what's the benefits of this approach? So, deductive approach has many benefits, which is time in classroom is spent only on the language principle. Then, most material can be easily taught in this way, and it engage faster learning of material. And I agree with that, because in this approach, you will consume less time because you already discussed to the students, so they will analyze it vividly because they already been provided, so they can answer it easily, so you can consume less time. Then the third approach is the reading approach. This is a very specific approach designed for a specific type of language learner. Vocabulary words are learned in context. The little grammar you teach must be oriented towards understanding of a piece of writing. So, in this approach, you will help introvert students to learn grammar, because it's your duty as a teacher that you will provide what's your student way of learning. So in this approach, the students who's not into socializing with other or gathering, the students who are not socializing to others will be benefited of this, because from the word reading approach, you will let your students learn grammar on their own. They will analyze. They will analyze on their own. They will understand on their own thoughts. So your students that is introverts will be benefited of this approach, because they will, if they are not into socializing with others, into learning grammar with others, then this reading approach will be effective for them, because the context, it is because vocabulary words are learned in context, so they will learn in the context, not in their surroundings, but in the context, because the little grammar you teach must be oriented towards understanding of a piece of writing. So this approach is very effective to the students, specifically if you have a student which is introverts, which is not into socializing with other students or with you as her or his teacher. Then the fourth one is the audiolingual approach. This approach is also known as Army method. So trivia, at the height of events in World War II, military personnel needed to learn the language of allies and the enemies alike as they swept through the fields of Europe and Asia. So, in my understanding, this approach involves pronunciation, an international drill, and choral drill. So, it is also it will contradict the reading approach, because in reading approach, the student is into reading. The student learn in context. But in audiolingual approach, the students is more exposed into more exposed into drama or something like that. Unlike the reading approach, the audio-lingual approach gives higher priority to the spoken from the writing form. Through this approach, the student pronunciation and rhythm will be improved as they were exposed to reading and drills activity. So, in this approach, the students' rhythm and pronunciation will be more improved because they are exposed in reading and drills activity. The fifth approach is the silent way approach. It believes that teaching too much can sometimes get in the way of learning. It means that in this approach, it is the approach which vary giving a silent treatment if you don't keep things friendly and explain the process to them. You're really encouraging them to do talking themselves. So, in this approach, you're encouraging them to be independent, to discover and figure out the language for themselves. But, as you talk a little as possible, you need to employ gestures and facial expressions to communicate with your students. So, in this approach, you will teach your students but in a silent way. You will just talk a little by little as possible, but it requires your gestures and facial expressions, because in your facial expression and gestures, your students will wonder, and if they will be wonder and just talk a little, they will wonder from your gestures and facial expressions. And if that happens, they will already talking to themselves. And if they are talking to themselves, they become independent and they will learn on their own. So that is the silent way approach. Then lastly, the functional notional approach. So the functional approach recognizes language as purposeful. This is the approach which we talk because we need to communicate something. The purpose, there's a purpose and meaning behind the sounds that came out to our mouth. So, every words that came out to our mouth have a purpose. When we speak, we do it to inform, to persuade, to insinuate, agree, question, and request, evaluate, and to perform. And perform actions. Teachers can evaluate how the student will be using the language. So, through this approach, teacher can evaluate the students as well as how the student will be using the language. Like for example, if you will give your student a task, then you necessarily give them instructions, right? Because if you will give your student a task, necessarily you will give them instructions. And during giving instructions, we have information and we communicate something. So, after giving your students an instruction, we can evaluate our student on how if they will be follow on how they will interpret what we said. So that is all about the functional notional approach. So there are 13 approaches, but we are free to choose just six of them. So this is what I choose: the inductive, the deductive, the reading approach, the audio lingual approach, the silent way, and the functional notional way. And as I discuss, I hope that you understand my demonstration and my discussion. That's all, ma'am. Thank you and God bless.